So this is part 1 of the station module for my modular elevated railway. I'm starting with the basic shell already blocked out, a long, low station room with a taller section at one end. In this session, I'll develop the main openings, panelling, trim, vertical cladding, and the first complete window assembly. For now, the building is deliberately plain. It is much easier to fix an awkward box at this stage than after spending an afternoon lovingly decorating the awkward box. I'm extending the first window bay along the platform wall and into the taller section. The aim is a regular railway building rhythm without making the openings feel mechanically identical. The raised end carries 2 levels of windows, but their proportions still need to belong to the same building. I'm also watching the amount of solid wall left between openings and at the corners. Something can look beautifully fine in CAD and become rather theoretical after slicing. These sections still need to survive printing, cleanup, and being handled by an actual human hand. Once the spacing looks balanced, I cut the openings through the shell. I always check the result from an angle before moving on. A flat elevation is very good at making questionable decisions look completely reasonable. I bring the shell back onto the elevated structure for the first proper context check. The platform, track, canopy and ironwork give me a much better sense of scale than the empty CAD grid. The station needs enough presence to anchor this part of the layout, but it should not overpower the structure beneath it. I'm also checking its length against the platform modules. This is meant to remain a flexible system, so the station should fit into different arrangements rather than insisting that every future layout be exactly as long as this one. At the opposite end, I begin setting out the entrance. This wall needs a little more hierarchy than the repeated platform windows. I keep the opening heights connected to the side elevation, then make the central opening wider so it reads as the main point of access. It is not the final door design yet, but it tells the eye where passengers are expected to go. I check the end from several angles. An entrance can look perfectly centered from the front and still feel cramped once the wall thickness and platform space become visible. By the end of this stage, the shell has its first complete family of openings, along with heroic levels of natural ventilation. Now I'm building the panel course beneath the windows. Each lower panel follows the bay above it, so the facade reads vertically as well as horizontally. This also breaks up what would otherwise be a very large, flat printed wall. A shallow panel adds shadow and gives the paintwork a natural boundary. I keep the relief restrained, deep enough to remain visible after primer, but not so deep that the slicer fills the area with support material. I develop one panel first and then repeat it along the wall. Repeated geometry saves a great deal of time, provided the first example is correct. Otherwise, it simply distributes the mistake more efficiently. Next, I add the horizontal bands that tie the elevations together. They separate the panel base from the main wall, establish a consistent sill line, and connect the long wing to the taller section. Without these bands, the changes in wall height can feel accidental. With them, the building begins to look as though somebody planned it, which is always encouraging. I keep the profiles simple and robust. At HO scale, a complicated full-size moulding can quickly become a collection of tiny ridges that disappear under paint or emerge from the printer looking tired. A few clean steps usually create a much better shadow line. The top of the building is still looking rather unfinished, so I move on to the cornice and fascia treatment. I begin on the taller section with a small projection near the roofline. It needs to be visible, but not so heavy that the raised end looks like a separate building wearing an oversized hat. I use a few stepped layers to create a clean shadow line and carry related trim along the lower wing. Every projection still needs enough thickness to print cleanly and enough depth to remain visible after painting. This is where the station's character changes most noticeably. I'm adding vertical cladding between the corner boards, horizontal courses, and window openings. It gives the passenger building a simpler timber rhythm and separates it visually from the dense, riveted ironwork underneath. The ribs are evenly repeated rather than being a literal miniature of every full-size board joint. At HO scale, the spacing needs to remain readable and, more importantly, printable. Scale modelling is often less about making every feature smaller and more about deciding which features still need to be seen. I check the depth against the surrounding trim. Too deep and the ribs swallow the window surrounds. Too shallow and they disappear after primer. Somewhere between those two is the useful answer, which the first test print will no doubt explain in its usual tactful manner. As the cladding wraps around the building, the shell finally develops a clear architectural language of its own. I start the first complete window with an outer surround sized to overlap the opening cleanly. Inside it, I build the frame and divide it with a vertical mullion and horizontal rail. That gives me a simple four-pane arrangement. It suits the railway architecture and should be much more practical to print than an elaborate miniature sash. The frame members need a careful balance. CAD makes it very easy to create something beautifully fine that becomes almost theoretical after slicing. I want the window to look light, but it still has to survive printing, cleanup, and installation. The outer surround sits against the cladding, while the frame is slightly recessed. That small difference creates a useful shadow and prevents the window from looking as though it has simply been drawn onto the wall. Once the assembly is complete, I check it carefully before copying it. Any flaw left in this master window is about to enjoy a very successful career across the entire station. placing the remaining windows and checking the completed rows from inside and outside. The four-pane frames change the scale of the building immediately. Empty openings make it feel oversized and unfinished. The smaller panes bring it much closer to the station character I'm aiming for. There are still several things deliberately missing: final doors, roof, glazing, station name board, interior details, and the confirmed printable divisions. This is part 1, the architectural shell, cladding, and the first repeatable window system. For the final view, I put the station back onto the elevated railway. The vertical timber cladding now contrasts with the riveted structure below. The panel base gives the building some weight, and the repeated windows establish a proper passenger station rhythm. Next, I'll work through the roof and remaining passenger details, then test the more demanding wall and window features on the printer. CAD is very good at confirming that everything meets mathematically, but the printer prefers to offer a second opinion. If you'd like to follow the station into part 2 and the first test prints, subscribe to Raw Scale Models and let me know which part of the process you'd like to see more closely.